Hi, hello everybody. Thanks for joining me today. Let me share my screen here. All right, great. Let's get started. So my name is Jamin Warren. I run a strategic consultancy called 256, and I'm very flattered to be here today to talk to you all about the relationship between gaming, marketing to gamers, and also gaming as a marketing channel. I've got a couple things that we're going to go through today. I'm going to give you a little bit of a lay of the land. I'll give you an introduction to myself. We'll talk a little bit about the distinction between gamer and gaming, as well as a framework that we use to help understand what's happening in the world of games. We'll talk a little bit about Animal Crossing, Fortnite, and then I will give you some tips for engaging in the space. So, a little bit about me and how I got started. I initially was hired by the Wall Street Journal. I was a music reporter before that. I covered arts and entertainment for the Journal for a bunch of different years. You can see there on the top left-hand side some of my early work back when Facebook was an upstart of only 20 million users. I was tracking them along with other future social media giants in the space. Including the first time that Facebook changed its newsfeed. Obviously, the implications there have been very, very big. But a lot of what I was asked to do was to move upstream. So I was a culture reporter. I didn't work on the business side. And so I was often looking at things that were happening out in the world. And so my editors would ask me, they would say, hey, look, something's coming down the pike. You should try to pay attention to it and then try to figure out why those things are happening. So I wrote the first story about the fellow on the left, Thomas Tull, who was a executive. He was a banking executive from Pittsburgh who moved to Los Angeles because he loved comic book movies, and he started a company called Legendary Entertainment that did the first Batman movies, which are widely regarded as rebooting the comic book movie approach. And so obviously that's a huge industry right now. And I was interested who was the person who was responsible for driving that. I also had to, convince the folks in the IT department to move the firewall so that I could watch a Second Life blood drive. Second Life is still around, still very, very popular. It makes a lot of money. So these things often exist for a longer period of time. But the period that I was writing was a really formative one. Games at that time were already a commercial force. They were already generating billions of dollars, but they didn't have the cultural cachet that I found in other entertainment mediums. So there are a couple of things that are happening that actually set the stage for the way that we think about games today. In 2005, Microsoft released its Xbox 360. And then a year later, not quite a year later, a couple months later, Sony's PlayStation 3 and the Nintendo Wii came out, and this blew up the world of gaming, millions of units sold. Then Grand Theft Auto 4 started what is now an annual tradition of a video game previously eclipsing box office sales records. Grand Theft Auto 4 broke that in 24 hours. And then Apple launched its App Store, which was a really big deal for the world of games. Suddenly it really introduced the idea of mobile gaming, which is half of the market today. And that was just started a bit over 10 years ago. Facebook also launched gaming, and then Minecraft, which was started by a independent game developer in Sweden, working on the game in his free time before selling not too much long later for $4 billion to Microsoft. And then Angry Birds, which was sort of rode the wave of app stores. So I felt like as a culture reporter, hey, look, we should be doing stuff in the world of games. I'm covering all of these different facets of culture. Gaming should really be one of them. Unfortunately, my editor didn't see things quite the same way. So he said, I don't get this video game thing. They ushered me off to cover television. This is right when peak prestige TV was starting, another cultural backwater, apparently. But I thought, as a disgruntled 20-something, hey, something's really happening in the world of games. I can go out and do this myself, so I should really give it a try. I initially started a media organization called Killscreen. It's a video game arts and culture organization. It still runs today, but that was my first foray into the world of video games. We initially started with a magazine. It was actually how I crossed paths with peers early on, working as media folks in New York City. We did the first ever arcade at the Museum of Modern Art. And so we did a lot of things in the arts and culture side, trying to convince the world that play matters. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we were cited in the Supreme Court decision that declared video games were a form of free speech. So gaming has always been a really near and dear piece of the way that I view the world. We started getting more calls from brands and agencies that were interested in what we do. They were interested in the world of games and they were trying to figure out how to get started. So I started a strategic consultancy called 256. We help brands reach gamers as customers. We work with a lot of different folks, but we focus a lot on the consumer electronics, technology, hardware and equipment, software and services. But we've done a lot of different things in this space, really trying to help clients think through how they should be approaching the world of games. Um, a lot of our clients, they really struggle with reaching gamers with an authentic and natural voice. I'll talk about this in just a second, but they're motivated by tapping into gaming, the gaming side of their existing audience, or finding a familiar customer in the world of gaming. And so what separates us is, that long history that I showed you, but also the framework for understanding like how games move and move out into the world. So, the approach now for me, the question I get asked more often is, help me get this video game thing. So one of the things that we really encourage clients to do is distinguish between gaming as an activity versus gaming as an identity. I know that sounds like a really simple concept, but it's really, really important. So if you think of gaming as an activity, you're answering the question, do you play games? And that's a very straightforward question. It's like a yes or no. When you look up gamer in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it defines it as someone who plays games. So you might be someone who on the left-hand side plays Valorant, a very popular multiplayer first-person shooter game that was released by Riot Games, one of the biggest PC game makers on the planet. It's sweeping up the Twitch charts right now. And on the right-hand side, you have Solitaire. You may not know this, but during the shelter-in-place orders, Microsoft's casual games division has posted record numbers. So lots of people are spending time in the activity of playing games. But if you ask people, are you a gamer? That's a separate question. They may not necessarily self-identify as a gamer. And the reasons, there are lots of reasons, why this might be. Some of it might be, some of it might be you don't look like the person on the left. That's a popular streamer named TSM Myth, because you're, Grace and Frankie on the right. So it creates a lot of really unique marketing challenges for us as we're trying to distinguish how we should reach folks in that space. Additionally, gaming is not just one thing. Again, this is, I think, is very important, and it's often confusing for lots of folks when they're stepping into the space for the first time. I took a quick assessment of all the things that have been happening in the world of games just over the past week, so the past 7 or 8 days. Some of you may know this, but it's been a really big and important week for the world of gaming. The Last of Us 2, giant video game, came out to acclaim. It was covered in the Washington Post and a bunch of other places. Niantic, the folks behind Pokemon Go, announced a deal with Punch Drunk, who does the immersive theater experience. Sleep No More, they're going to be working on stuff together. Grand Theft Auto Online, many of you, I'm sure, don't step into that space. Over 100 million, over 100 million users for that title. It's a free to play experience that's been making a lot of waves right now. Twitch, one of the biggest streaming platforms on the planet, banned the president of the United States. Discord, another chat app, 200 million users, just making a pivot towards going more open-ended. They want to attract people who are not just gamers. Mixer, which was Microsoft's approach to the world of games, they shut it down, sold it to Facebook Gaming. The Me Too movement has finally come to video games really just in the last week and a half. Disco Elysium, which is an independent game done by a set of Estonian developers, was optioned for a movie by the folks who made Sonic the Hedgehog. And to cap it all off, Gucci and an esports team called Fnatic, they released a watch together. A lot of stuff that's going on in the world of games. And so it can be really difficult to figure out, how should I make steps in? So what we encourage clients to do is we adopt this framework. It's really helpful for thinking about all the things that are happening in the world of games. And we divide gaming into 3 different levels. The first level is play. That's at the core of the gaming experience. This level encompasses everything that happens in the game. This is probably the place that most people are familiar with if they've touched a video game at some point. The next level is share. And so that represents the community that develops around the appreciation of games. Conversation and communication naturally form around the game. So whether that's through chatting with teammates on an app like Discord, that could be watching gameplay on Twitch, it could be laughing about memes on Reddit, but sharing that experience in a community environment is unique to games. And games often have their own platforms that really take advantage of some of the unique interactive elements of games. The final level is experience. And so this is where players interact with games in the physical world. This obviously has changed a lot over the last couple months as many of us are indoors due to shelter in place. But this is a place where players encounter the games they play in real life contexts outside of the digital space. So this might happen through a billboard, gaming conventions. Many of these things obviously are happening virtually at this point, but there's an outer ring, which is really important to engage in. These three layers, they basically align with different channels, which can make it very helpful when you're thinking about how to go about spending dollars, when you're thinking about how to engage in the gaming space. So you've got in-game marketing, which I'll talk about in Adver games, that share level, and then the experience level as well. And so what that does is it takes this really big world of games and it's able to push it through these three different lenses. So play, share, and experience. When you organize it like this, it's much easier to apply pressure. And that's really important when you're looking at the world of games and trying to figure out what should I be doing there? I'm hearing a lot about it. I want to do something interesting and unique, but I'm not quite sure where I should start. And so one of the things that we do with clients, we do a scorecard for them. My financial advisor says, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So that's one place where we're often helpful. All right. So I would like to talk about let's talk about that play level because I'm sure that's why many of you are here to talk about Animal Crossing and Fortnite. And so I want to talk about that inner ring, really important space, that play layer. So one of the big questions that you might have is like, why market with games? If you're doing something at that play level with video games as a product and property, what's the rationale for doing that? The biggest reason is that the gaming industry and player base has grown year over year. It's up 67%. 67% of Americans play video games, up from 2018 to 2019. According to the Bureau of Labor of Statistics, the amount of time Americans spend playing video games and board games, that's increased 50% since 2003. The video game industry was expected to reach over $150 billion last year. And for context, that's bigger than the worldwide film box office. That's bigger than music streaming. That's bigger than the NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL combined. Obviously, this is pre-COVID. And so the growth in those figures has obviously grown since then. So really important, that's where your audience is. That should be the most important thing that you're looking to do. Despite the prevalent view that gamers are young, basically just young men, gamers are also really diverse. So 46% of gamers in the US identify as women, 21% are over the age of 50. So there's definitely something for everybody. It's not just one particular person. The second big reason is that video games, unlike other advertising spaces or other places where you might be engaging with consumers, it requires active focus. So the audience isn't just like scrolling around or flipping through something on a mobile app, they're actively engaged. Average gaming session that lasts an hour and 22 minutes. And reports estimate that players are in game for an average of 7 to 12 hours a week. So as a point of comparison, Americans aged 18 to 24 only spend about 2 hours watching TV. So when you're figuring out where you should be applying pressure, it's very easy to go to a place where somebody's spending a lot of time. The last reason is that advertisements in that play layer in games, those are functionally different from those in like other types of media. So while a viewer might spot a product in a movie one time, a player will come across a video billboard, for example, multiple times in a single gaming session. And so that repeated exposure is really important. You get higher rates of recall and brand recognition as well. Fortunately or unfortunately, there are so many options for things that you can do in the world of games. So again, looking just at that play level, looking just at the game's experiences as well. So those are in-game advertising. IGA is another way to think about it. There's basically four main ways that you can, if you want to do something with video games as a product, there's four main ways that you can engage. The first is through an equivalent of a banner ad. We won't go into that too much, but mobile game advertisement, there's a lot of different things that you can do. You can do banners, you can do offer walls, interstitials, video rewards, interactive. You can do something that's geolocated. There's a lot of things. That's half the market is on the mobile side. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with mobile games. The second is what are called diegetic ads. And so this is similar to placing a Coke can in a soap opera. It's something that's natural to the universe in which it inhabits. You obviously see this a lot in film and television. The third method is becoming an active part of the game. So either through the visual design itself or the mechanics. Mechanics refer to like the way that you play. So if you think of a mechanic, that's like Pac-Man, eating the little power pellet. I guess they're power pellets. In Super Mario Brothers, jumping, those are mechanics, and brands can have a way to influence those core mechanics. And then the last way is advert games, because that's where brands create their own experiences. Very difficult to do well. There have been some good examples, but mostly a lot of not so great examples. I'm going to focus for the purpose of this talk, we're going to focus on those two categories, the diegetic in-game ads and IP collaborations, simply because I think that's where we've seen a lot of movement over the last couple months. And again, to go back to Animal Crossing and Fortnite, that's a place where we're seeing a lot of activity. So diegetic ads, pull up chat here. Diegetic ads are integrated into the environment of the game and are similar to product placement in movies. So a diegetic ad, that could be a billboard, a player races by in game. Another example is NBA 2K, for example, that features courtside ads. Those are things that you emulate the real game. The real game, NBA emulates the real game in television, so it's easy for advertisers to step in. EA Sports and Pizza Hut made their first ever esports deal last year in 2019. So all of the Madden NFL 20 championship series that was taking place inside of the Pizza Hut stadium, that was an effort to mirror what was happening in the real world. And so you see this a lot, like these types of advertisements often happen in sports and simulation games, simply because it's very easy for brands to step into those spaces. Obama very famously started to run basically in-game outdoor ads. They were really popular back when in 2008. And so you see that any place where video games mimic the real world, it's often easier just to put an in-game ad in that way. So the advantage that diegetic in-game ads that have over traditional product placement, it's really about repetition. So unlike in the movies or in TV programs, video games, those get played repeatedly over and over and over again. And so whereas a viewer has to go back and rewatch something where there might be a brand touch point, a player can come across something in a video game over and over again within the same amount of time. And again, that leads to higher rates of recall, brand recognition, and favorable attitudes. Now, I mentioned that usually these types of ads happen in realistic games, right? So that's a place, if you're a brand in the real world, it's easy to plug yourself into a virtual version of that world. But one of the more interesting examples of diegetic engagement has been happening in the world of Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing New Horizon, just to give you a little bit of background for those of you who may have played it or someone who did, it was released in March. A lot of the success of the game is due to the fact that you had so many people who were at home looking for something to fill their time. But it's also really important to recognize that this was a popular franchise to begin with. So this is something that particularly for younger millennials, it was something that they were playing when they were kids and were looking forward to each subsequent release. So it definitely wasn't something that came out of nowhere. One of the things that makes Animal Crossing really compelling is that it has this real-time clock. So when you log into the game, you create your own island, it asks you what hemisphere you're in, it knows what time of day it is, and then there are all these events that happen throughout the year. A lot of things happen on your island. Some of them happen from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Some things only happen in the morning. So it's really tied to really getting you into the space at different times of day. Aside from that, you're on a desert island, and that's really ultimately about it. You can more or less do whatever you want. And that it's very, very open-ended. So there's a mild progression in terms of trying to attract other villagers to come to where you are. But for the most part, you can do whatever it is that you want. When I play with my goddaughter, she's just more interested in showing me her outfits. The game has been tremendously successful, over 13 million units sold, which is really, really remarkable in such a short period of time, particularly for a game like Animal Crossing. Given its popularity, one of the things that we've been watching has been some really interesting approaches to diegetic engagement in a game like Animal Crossing. This is like without Nintendo's consent necessarily. That's part of what makes this interesting. But there's a couple examples I just wanted to show you of really creative ways to do something in the Animal Crossing universe. The Getty here in Los Angeles, they provided a tool for users to convert the Getty's obviously very large collection of open access artwork into digital representations for use in the world of Animal Crossing. It was really cool. So basically, you could take artwork that already exists in the Getty, you could upload it, and then you could share things with your friends. There's already a museum function in the game, so I'll talk about that in a second. But this was a way for players who maybe felt nervous about creating their own artwork. They were able to basically make it themselves. This was basically partnered with a social engagement as well. They had basically a digitized art campaign, but you could tag the Getty basically and use their hashtag for AC Art Generator. It's really cool. So basically, you could take the work on the right and basically work on the right and scan it in. It would come into the game. The other big place, and this is something where some of you all might be familiar, is that fashion brands have done a really excellent job of doing creating new things into the world of Animal Crossing. It initially started with really high end folks. So you had Valentino, Marc Jacobs, a variety of high fashion brands where basically in the game you can create your own patterns basically, and then use those patterns for your character. They used it as an opportunity to take things from their existing collection and put it into basically put it into the game, which is really, really smart. A lot of what made this successful is that it was natural to the game. I think people forget this. There's already an artwork function. There's already fashion, and so this is a way for brands to engage. They weren't necessarily creating something new. And again, they don't have to get Nintendo's permission to go about doing it. The experience also adds in-game value. So it's not just you're doing it because you can. You're doing it because it looks really cool to have your character wear something that's designed by a premier fashion house in game. And there are already tools in place, such as the Animal Crossing pattern maker. One of the things that's been really interesting is the amount of basically the amount of sort of free materials that is disseminated throughout the internet that enable people to create better, newer, and better things in the world of Animal Crossing. These brands were basically they're piggybacking off of that. And then there's also a clear integration with that share layer that I talked about. So they're using it as part of a larger social strategy to, and it's not just something that lives in the game, but it's something that really, most importantly, lives outside of the game. So again, really smart way to do diegetic advertising. The other type of in-game advertising that I wanted to take a look at is called IP collaborations. So those are a much higher effort way to get a brand into the gaming world. So this goes beyond digital billboards, product placement. This form of advertising, it really integrates into the brand, into the game itself. There's been a big shift in the world of games. When I was growing up, what would happen is you'd buy a video game, you'd play it for a little while, maybe invite some friends over. That was it. You'd sell it. As games moved into the internet age, maybe there's additional content. One of the big things that's happening now is you functionally have what's called games as a service, which means that games are designed to be played over a longer period of time. If you look at the top games on a streaming platform like Twitch, those are games that have been around 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And the way these games exist is that they prolong the player game relationship. So you get updates to the gameplay and events, etc. So that means there's a lot of opportunities to do unique collaborations inside of these games because the audience is carrying over year. So there's a couple different examples of those. You have simulators. John Deere has done some work with Farm Simulator, which is exactly as it sounds. Hot Wheels did a partnership with Forza, for example. And then one of the more interesting ones, John Wick, the movie, did a partnership with Fortnite, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The three different categories, simulators, often the brands will partner to supply materials, CAD data, manuals, access to the products being emulated. For cosmetic, that's just like a skin. So it's just an outfit that someone might wear. It doesn't really impact the games. But the really interesting stuff is cosmetic and gameplay. So it's both something that influences the games themselves. And so that's been a place where Fortnite has really led the way. It was released in 2017. There are three main game modes. I think people often forget that. It's not just the popular battle royale, 1 versus 100, 1 versus 99 that most people are familiar with. There's a creative mode that's much more like Minecraft. There's also a more story-based mode. That's where the game actually gets its name from. And they've been experimenting with this party royale format as well, which is a movie theater, concert venue, social space. Christopher Nolan's new movie is going to be showcased in it. So they're really trying to push at the edges of what something like Fortnite can do. For IP collaborations, one of the earliest ones that they did that wasn't marketed that way was a tie-in with the Avengers Endgame. The villain in that movie, Thanos, shows up into that universe. And it was it was a notable because it found a really natural way to embed the marketing. You got this basically special glove that enabled you. One person in the game got to be Thanos. Really, really creative. Wendy's also took advantage of a Fortnite game mode called Food Fight, where there were two different teams, Team Burger and Team Pizza. There was a Wendy avatar that was created for the game. And the way that this was more of an in-game performance where they focused on destroying the in-game freezers, which was a nod to Wendy's commitment to using fresh beef. This was an event that was streamed on Twitch, but again, a really, really interesting way of introducing a new style of play to a popular title like Fortnite. And then the last one, which happened a couple months ago, is the largest virtual in-game concert with Travis Scott. This one is interesting because there was a direct merchandising tie in there. There's a big in-game concert. The entire space of the game changed. Players were thrown in. It changed the way that people interacted with the space for about 20 minutes. And then ultimately the Travis Scott team was looking to push people to purchase merchandise. So there's a direct tie-in there. A lot of what made these successful is that Fortnite is very, very flexible as a creative universe, and that's putting it lightly. There aren't a lot of rules in terms of what works and won't work in Fortnite. As a brand, it's pretty amorphous in that way. The other big thing is that these experiences work because they augmented the way that people actually play the game in very, very unique and creative ways. And these were brands that were already engaged with gamers. So this is definitely jumping on the treadmill at 12 miles an hour. And so this was a nice addition to an existing strategy. The last thing, and this probably goes without saying, is that there's only one Fortnite. So the supply is ultimately pretty limited, right? So if you want to do something with Fortnite, you have to get basically work with the Fortnite team. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And just in that play space, right? There's so many different types of things that you can do. But I just want to showcase a couple of them to give you some optionality. Couple quick tips for you before I go. The first one is have an outcome. I know this sounds very straightforward, but I see a lot of brands rushing into the esports space simply because it feels new and popular, not recognizing that the mobile space is half of the market. So having a distinct outcome for you in terms of why you want to do something in gaming is incredibly important. Gamers can sniff that stuff out, and you want to make sure it's a longer term engagement, not just a one-off. I would also encourage you to define your audience by play, share, and experience. Figure out what channels you're already active in, and then try and match your gaming engagement with those existing channels. And the last thing is that the things that I showed you, those are really expensive. So there's a lot of other lower cost options to engage gamers, particularly at that share layer. There's lots of options for you. Don't feel like you just have to do something with Fortnite in order to make an impact in the world of games. Great. Thank you so much. We've put together a report on marketing to gaming, specifically with these in-game advertisements. If you want to go deeper, feel free to shoot me an email. If you have any questions, it's also available on our website. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.